time to talk to the Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce, and to take us there, here was his colleague Matt Canavan arguing against lockdowns.
I think what we've got to do is live with this. We've got to learn to live with this, because we just can't keep locking down every time there's an outbreak. What is the justification now? Because we can't remove all risk from our life, and there is no choice here that does not impose massive costs and risks on people.
Barnaby Joyce, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Speersy. Good to be on your show. Freezing Walker Road.
Very good. Do you share Senator Canavan's view there on lockdowns, or do you think these lockdowns, and particularly the tighter rules in Sydney announced yesterday, are fair enough?
I think what we've got to do is find the transition from suppression of the virus, and obviously our main goal is to keep people alive. The OECD average would be that there'd be 30,000 people dead in Australia, and we've done very well. I think we've got less than 1,000. So the goal is to keep people alive. We're doing that. We've been very successful at that. Suppression is the way to go, and as more of the vaccine gets out, and we've got just shy of 10 million people who've received one inoculation or two. 10 million inoculations have gone out, so some people have received one, some people have received two. As that process picks up, and we did about 1 million people last week, so it's accelerating along, then we have the transition from to a more open process.
But right now,
we haven't quite arrived there yet. So
right now, these lockdowns are justified?
Yeah, right now we've got to make sure we keep the virus suppressed, and that's what's happening, because we've got to make sure that we keep people alive. We've got to keep that incredible track record we have in Australia. That would be the envy of the rest of the world, and how we've managed to deal with this virus. And the ultimate goal, even ahead of vaccinations, is keeping people alive, and we're doing that.
A few weeks ago, you said of Melbourne's most recent lockdown, the people in regional areas didn't really care, and, quote, you can almost smell the burning flesh from here. What was the point you were trying to make there?
Well, obviously, I don't know whether that was supposed to be on the record or off the record, but that's what happens with sit-down paper interviews, and fair enough.
Either way, what was the point you were making?
But the issue is that in regional areas, like, we don't have any COVID cases here. There are no COVID cases around Walker. There's no COVID cases in New England, and I hope that remains the case. So we have to be dealt in a different manner to what's happening in the southwest suburbs of Sydney, or what was happening at Bondi.
Pretty insensitive thing to say, though, isn't it, to smell the burning flesh?
We had a ridiculous situation in Queensland where a person whose gate was in Queensland but their house was in New South Wales was having to get a permit. And we've got to get round that sort of peculiar process because of an arbitrary statement that's made by a premier that includes their whole state but doesn't take into account the epidemiology of the virus. So that we've got to make sure that one side of a line is treated as the other side of the line if the virus is not on one side and not on the other side.
All right, but no apology for what you said there about Melbourne?
Look, I absolutely apologise for that, but it was in a paper interview. I don't think there's any record of me saying it, and I think it's probably more obiter dicta on the side of a conversation. Well, okay, and it got out there in the public forum, and I apologise for that.
Okay, on the vaccine rollout, how are things going in regional Australia? You mentioned the national figures. How are the vaccines going in the regional areas?
Well, we have been actually the average in Sydney is around 33%. What we have in the inner regional areas is around about 34%. Outer regional areas is around about 37%. So we're doing quite well. But remote areas, we've got more of a task there, and we've got to pick that up. So I think in all, I think it's in the high 20s, but I won't be held to that. But I think it's in the high 20s. I think 28%. So what we've got to do is make sure that we protect vulnerable communities, and we have now more than 74% for people in aged care homes. Over 74% for people over 70 have received one inoculation or two.
Have you had your jab yet?
Yes, I have. I had my first, and I'll get my second, I imagine, when I get back down to Canberra. So. And just like every other person, and part of the process, and making sure we do our bit. I think in Australia, like in most other nations, they're not getting to 100% of people vaccinated. They'll probably they'll do well if they get to 75, and we're hoping that we get as many people vaccinated as possible, and with basically 1 million Pfizer vaccines turning up in the coming week, and around about 1 million people a week being vaccinated, and still there's the usage of AstraZeneca. We're starting to do a very good job of matching the supply with the demand, and that's the process we'll be taking forward.
Let's turn to climate change. Will you support any sort of net zero by 2050 emissions target?
Well, you know, this question is put up just up beside me here, Speers, is the Walk Road Hotel. And in the Walk Road Hotel, they have a restaurant. Now, generally how restaurants work is you go in and you get a menu, and they've got what's on the menu for lunch and what the price is. Now, that is how a competent decision is made, and that's what we're looking for, what's on the menu and what the price is. What the Labor Party's approach is, from what I see,
I'm asking
is
about your
they
approach.
don't care. They
You're in government.
Yeah, well,
you're now the
I've given
Deputy
you
Prime Minister, so what's your view?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I want to thank the Australian people for that great honour. Our approach is we want to see exactly what's involved, and we want to see exactly what the cost is. I think that is the rational process of how you go about anything. And as I said, the Labor Party's approach is they don't care what's on the menu, and they don't care what is the price. And when what turns up is sautéed gherkins and sashimi tadpoles, they're prepared to pay anything for it because they've said they'll accept anything for lunch.
Well, the Labor Party will be accountable for their position, but as I say, you're now the second top figure in the government. You can get answers on this. I'm just trying to get a clear position on your position. Are you in favour of net zero by 2050?
I can't be more clearer than that. What you're saying is give me an open check, and I just put any, do you want lunch? Well, I'm quite happy to consider the menu when you tell me what's on it and what it costs.
But you're in government. The people who can give you those ingredients or that menu are at your disposal.
What is it? Tell me what it costs.
I'm not in government. You are.
Tell me how we do it.
You have the government at your disposal.
I know, but I'm just. Well, we're going to go round and round circles on this until you lay down a plan and show us the costs. You haven't arrived at a point of consideration. Now, show us a plan, show us the costs. We're happy to consider it.
Well, you said to Phil Curry
precisely that.
You said to Phil Curry in the Fin Review this week, the likelihood of Joyce getting endorsement from his own party room to agree to net zero is zero. That's where the net zero lies.
That is also a statement of the bleeding obvious. You, as leader of the party, you're not the sole person making unilateral decisions. And the Nationals party room has a right to be part of that process, and I'm intending to make sure they are.
Well, you indicate in that comment, though, that the party room won't back net zero.
Well, the party room's the same answer. If I go to the party room, they'll say to me, Barnaby, what is the plan and what is the cost? And if I can't answer that question, and we haven't got to that point yet, then of course it's going to be a case where they say, well, we have to be prudent and wait till you show us that process.
Right, because a couple of your members, Michael McCormack, the former leader, and Darren Chester, are today in the paper open, at least, to the idea of net zero by 2050. Are you open to it?
Well, they're saying the same thing. Show us what's on the menu and show us what it costs, and we'll decide whether we're going to eat it.
OK, so you are open to it?
Well, I've been saying the same thing all the way through.
Okay.
As I've said, show us what's on the menu, show us the plan, show us the cost, and then you can come back and put me on insiders again.
Well, we'll definitely do that, Barnaby Joyce. Look, Europe, it's Australia's fourth largest trading partner. On Friday, it unveiled its plans for carbon tariffs. The US, Australia's second largest trading partner, on the same day. The Democrats in Congress unveiled their own plans for tax on imports from high-emitting countries. Japan's thinking about it as well. Australia is going to face trade penalties if we don't do more on climate change, aren't we?
Well, the first thing you said is that America's showing plans, and I suppose that's precisely it. They'll be showing plans to their people about how they do it, for which they can anticipate the costs. What's happening in Europe with their so-called carbon tariff is just a tariff. Forget about the adjective, just concentrate on the noun. It's just a tax. And what they're doing is bringing in sort of arbitrary tariff barriers. And if the world goes down that process, then its capacity to economically pick itself up after COVID is going to be very much impeded. We have to have a process of trade, a fluid trade, so that we quickly pick up back to where we are. Now, people might be pointing their, looking at Australia, but we've managed to get our unemployment rate down below 5%. It's the lowest it's been in a decade. So Australia's management of this process, I think, has been on the economic front. I know we've got to propose reduction in GDP, but as far as employment goes, we've been doing exceptionally well.
Yeah, my question though is about what these carbon tariffs might mean if we don't do more on climate change. I mean, do you ever look at what the US, the UK, Europe, Japan, indeed China are doing on climate change? You think, look, maybe the world is moving more on this now?
Well, that all becomes part of the anticipation of cost, doesn't it? I mean, I'm an accountant, Speersy, and ultimately prudence in that process means you always know what the cost is. You always know whose jobs are on the line. You always got to know how it affects the mum and dad in the house, the mum and dad in the house, and what's going to cost them, because you're responsible for answering to them about what you're intending to sign up for, and that I believe most areas, people get infuriated when governments foist things on people without proper information and an honest appraisal of what the cost is.
Let's talk about China. You've argued China's a greater threat to Australia than either COVID or climate change. Why do you believe that?
Well, I think that what we've seen with China, we've had incursions into India where people died, conflicts where people died. We've seen basically the unilateral takeover of the South China Sea, or putting themselves in a position where the United States have to do freedom of movement through it. We've seen the incarceration of over in excess of 1 million Uyghur people on sort of an ethnic basis, and I think they still remain our largest trading partner. So this is something that's clear and apparent and right there now. We have a Chinese spy ship sitting off our coast as we speak, basically monitoring everything that has in our military exercises with the United States. We've had hackings of our computers. Now, this is happening right now. And so I do say to people that I want to make sure that the freedoms and liberties of their children and their grandchildren are as apparent as they were for you and me. We take it as a birthright. Now, to do that, we've got to make sure that we're a strong nation. We've got to make sure we're strong across all facets, from agriculture to industry to mining, the whole lot. And that is how we do our greatest task, which is to hand to our children the freedoms and liberties that we took as a birthright.
Well, given those concerns, human rights concerns, military concerns, espionage concerns, should Australia be selling as much iron ore and coal to China to fuel its economic rise as we are?
Well, if China didn't get it from us, they'd be getting it from somewhere else. And I note that they're currently trying to set up basically an iron ore province in Guinea as a mechanism of basically putting real competition on Australia. I mean,
but you're saying they're our greatest threat,
yet
it's okay to keep selling them these resources.
They're our greatest trading partner, and that's the reality we live in, and that's the complex matrix we have to deal with, because we can't become strong if we're not trading, but we've got to become strong to hand on to your children, to your grandchildren, to all your listeners' grandchildren, the freedoms and liberties that we have. And we can only do that from a position of strength. You can't do it from a position of hope. You've got to do it from a position of strength.
A couple of other issues. You're now sitting on the Cabinet Task Force on the status of women. What do you think are the most pressing issues facing women today?
Well, we've got to make sure that the pay gap is dealt with. We've got to make sure that people feel basically a sense of safety in all facets of their life. We've got to make sure that especially people in remote areas have the health care and the health needs that are at least comparable, or at least within sight of what you get in urban areas, especially education especially for girls coming through in remote areas. I've been a big advocate. The second biggest boarding school in Australia is a state-owned boarding school. It's Farrer, but we have no girls' state-owned boarding school. And a lot of these areas, to get the education where they can do chemistry, where they can do physics, where they have the numbers that they can actually do the subjects that you could do at North Sydney Girls High, you need a greater pool of people, and we've got to try and work out how we cross that as well.
What about
there are so many.
What about the issues of sexual harassment and being believed if you speak up? Do you think that's a big issue for women?
Well, I think it's that all these facets, of course, they're important, and if allegations are made and the proper process must be followed, and if they're substantiated, the proper punishment must follow that as well.
The sexual harassment training is being introduced in Parliament House. It's only going to be optional and only a 1 hour session. Will you sign up, Barnaby Joyce?
I've got absolutely no problems in signing up at all. In fact, we've had discussions in our office already.
So you're going to do it?
Absolutely. I've got no problems doing it whatsoever. Was this a trick question?
No. Just checking whether you're going to sign up. It is optional.
No. So there you go. There's the answer.
A couple others. Thousands of Australians are unable to return home, as we know right now, and yet there's a right-wing British media personality, Katie Hopkins, who's been allowed in and is already boasting on social media that she's breaking the hotel quarantine rules. What do you think? Are you okay with someone like this being able to come into Australia?
No. I'm the one who wanted to send home Johnny Depp's dog, so I've got no problem sending home someone. So I've got no problem sending home someone who wants to flout our laws. So they want to flout our laws, then you pack your bongo and get out of the country.
Just finally, on your return to the leadership, did you ever raise the prospect with anyone of running on a ticket with Darren Chester as your deputy to return to the job?
Well, that's always a decision for the party room. I mean, the party room makes the decisions.
Did you ever talk to someone about approaching Darren Chester to run as your deputy?
I'd have no problems running with anybody as a deputy because I don't make the decision about the deputy.
I'm asking whether you asked someone to speak to him about running as your deputy.
I've just answered I've answered that question. I've got no problems with any person running as a deputy. None. But I don't pick the deputy. The party room picks the deputy.
But I'm asking whether to get the numbers, you asked an intermediary to talk to Darren Chester about running as your deputy. Because
there is a prospect that anybody can be the deputy, I've got no problems with running with anybody as a deputy, whether it's Darren Chester, whether it's Ken O'Dowd, whether it's Anne Webster, any of them I would happily have as my deputy because they would be the decision of the room.
The question is, did you reach out to anyone, though, with that specific request?
I've got no, as I've said, I've got no problems. If it was Darren, I've got no problems working with Darren. If it's David, and I've got absolutely no problems with working with David. And I would have got no problems having discussions with any of them. If they want to be the deputy, good luck. But it's picked by the party room.
Yeah, but you haven't answered that question. Did you reach out to anyone and say, ask Darren to run as my deputy so we can get the numbers?
Well, the answer is I said to many people, if they were the deputy, I'd be happy to work with them. But it's a decision of the party room.
Barnaby Joyce, thanks so much for joining us there from Walker.
You're welcome. Walker Road.
Thanks for clearing that up.